Any wish to offer an opening prayer?
Okay, let's pray. Dear Lord, we just want to thank you for this beautiful day and warmer weather and this opportunity to assemble here today and do some good work. We just ask for wisdom and guidance and an efficient use of time today.
Okay, attendance, Kenneth Pitt.
Here.
George Speaks.
Here.
Roger Noel.
Here.
Clayton Matt is absent today. Teresa Wall McDonald is absent. And Shane Henderson is online.
Hey, as usual, the minutes of this meeting will be available on the DNR and CSK2 website. This is a working meeting, so the board will not be taking action today except for approving the agenda. Okay, has the board had a chance to look at the agenda? Any additions or motion? Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, board members, if you would entertain some information from your engineer. I do have one suggestion of a change if it meets the board's approval. I'd like to remove item 5, update on development domestic allowances. I've got some new information that will need to be incorporated into that. And if we could replace that with a fairly quick discussion about the board's bank account.
Any comments?
I'm okay with that, so I'll make the motion to revise the agenda to delete item number 5, update on development of domestic allowance, and add a brief summary on the bank account.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion's carried. Is there any public comment for items not on the agenda? Anybody online?
Not seeing any public comment online.
Thank you. Board business. That's something I'm supposed to address, but I have no clue what I'm supposed to address. So I will pass on that. On to number 4, the WRIS database working session. Walter, are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I have a presentation for you today. Our order of things is a little fluid. My presentation in the middle will take a pause out, and we are lucky enough today to have the Montana DNRC, Ms. Payla Hoyt, available, and she is also prepared to present some information. The intent on our discussions today is to better inform the board members of what the water right information system is, the enhancement project, to help to define that, and to look towards some forward movement, not so much in official board action, but having some discussions to help us guide us towards a next step that would ultimately be approved by the board. So with your permission, you mind if I begin?
Please do.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, that's me, and we can go to the next slide. Thank you, James. We're a little, I had planned to have my computer set up, but I was caught in the same construction as everybody else, and lucky for us, Mr. Frakes back here was willing to get us all set up on his machine. So we're working through this together. I thought one of the first lead-ins would be a useful thing is to let you know that it is in fact in the Constitution of Montana, you know, the article about environmental and natural resources, that the legislature shall, you know, provide for administration, control, and regulation of water rights and shall establish a system of centralized records in addition to the present system of local records. And so that is a kind of a big umbrella on why are we talking about this water right information system? It is fundamentally important, and it is so fundamentally important that when they move forward with the state constitution, if they include that under 9.4. Additionally, you know, as we all know, Montana DNRC is tasked generally with creating and maintaining the system. Their funding, their directives, and so forth. They are the ones generally with the keys to the castle, and you know, and usually held somewhat accountable. So we appreciate the Montana DNRC for providing that. And where we're at with the current water right information system is certainly we would not be anywhere near there if it was not for the historic practices and forethought of the Montana DNRC. Excellent. So I wanted to give you a quick overview on what this thing is. We talk about it a lot. What is this water right information system? Well, there's really kind of these main structures that really provide what we're looking at. And that's, you know, there's these unique water right types. People who've worked in the trade, they know that there's 600, it means a new permit, and 606 is a change, and they have a number and a water right type. And those all kind of equate to these forms that you've been as a board contemplating and moving forward. The difference is that the current water right information system has all of the unique water right types used all over the rest of the state. Does not include the bundle of water right types that are part of the compact and here on the reservation. Second to that, we have unique water right numbers, unique water right application numbers. Those are usually the same number, but they are a slightly different structure and used to co-manage the information. And then we have these things called reports. The reports are like, you know, you go in and after everything's input, you know, the water rights database, the water rights information system, creates this thing that you sign. That's how you issue the water right. And all that information gets spit out in this standard format. It helps you generate the change authorizations. It helps you generate general abstracts. Those reports are kind of an essential part of it. So those are like the key, you know, structures, I'm going to say at this point. The other, you know, thing to kind of keep track of is, you know, what's in there about a water right. Okay. There's these elements, flow rates, volumes, purposes, points of diversion, periods of use, places of use, storage, sources, canals, pumps. The point is, like, there's a lot of information about each individual water right, and it's got to be housed in an organizational structure where the sources are all spelled the same. The system for naming the points of diversion and the rates and everything all has kind of a match to it. This is also where there's remarks that describe the water right, and it's where we designate who's the owners, you know, both past and current. And then there's these application events, because whenever one of these applications comes in and a new event happens, typically the department currently, they track that event and they put it like, okay, the application was received on this day. The application was initially reviewed and entered on this day. We got through a criteria assessment on this day. We issued something on this day. And all those events, including letters of defect is what we call them. They call them letters of deficiency. You know, over at DNRC, it's all kind of housed in this centralized system. We currently are using just a spreadsheet to keep track of that, and it's a little clunky comparatively. And then this other thing is supplemental and related rights. It's a big deal to let you know that this water right, you know, is used on the same ground as this water right, and then there's this related right, and that this database allows for that, that kind of cohesion, right? Mr. Frakes, if you would. So what's it do? You got all the information in there. What are some of the functions of this thing? Okay, this is water rights database. It's like water court decrees and adjudication, water compacts, public notices, public access, ownership updates, queries by source, owner, place of use. All that becomes, you know, an option with the database. Tracking of owners is a huge, fundamentally important thing when a property sells. And DNRC is still charged with maintaining that aspect for the water right information system for even the water rights that are issued out of this office. Yes, sir. Continued here. Sometimes people have to take measurements. You track those in the water rights information system. You link geocodes, well logs, the original records. You track issuance conditions, withdrawals, splits, reductions, links to geospatial data. Even there's some of the DNRC's GIS information can pull out of the water right information system. There's the tracking of file locations, and when I say file, I mean like the original hard copy file. So we have a hard copy file for each application that comes into this office. You know, eventually we'd like to know exactly where that is. So there's a logging system that happens through this water right information system. Okay, and tracking application events, which is a little redundant with what I brought up earlier, but you get the point. Yeah. And this is the point where before I totally let you up your pad, if you have any questions for me, you could ask me now. Otherwise, I'm very happy to hand it over to them. All right.
So Ethan, I got
Yes, sir.
thinking about this.
Mhm.
Can you just go online? Can James go online and we can just link to the database?
We cannot. We can link to the water rights query system.
Oh, that's okay.
And the water rights query system harvests information from the true water right information system.
Yeah.
And so, the linkages, I often draw this really messy picture that shows like the water court has got information coming and going from the water right information system. The NRC has got that going on. We got DOAs interacting with it to prompt for ownership updates. Eventually we'll have our office doing that. The information system itself has got like a core database structure with the skin over the top of it so that people using it can get in there and have a little more graphic user, friendly graphic user interface and so forth. But there's all these kind of tendrils that reach out to all the different spots, and that's why the security is an issue, because it does provide a secure format.
Have you ever seen the database?
No,
Can you just do the query then?
If you can pop open the query system, however, now that we've got that explanation and give a quick look to see what, how excellent this public system is.
what is the learning curve on learning to utilize this? I mean,
Well, James just figured it out.
So this is available to the public. And this is how the public does their research on water, right? So for instance, I don't know. So type in 76LJ. And then 9, I'm just pulling a number out of my, well, any of those. Go ahead and just click one of those.
Probably not gonna pull one up.
If that's not in 76LJ. So we'll go back and type in 922. 0 or something. Dash 00, dash 00. Or space 00. You gotta have a space in there. Or else it will default. So just so you guys know, that first number, 76 LJ, the state's divided into water basins. And so each basin is assigned a code and a number. So 76 LJ is the upper Flathead Basin.
Okay.
And so when a water right is generated, it's generated on the first number is the basin it's in.
Okay.
And then the second number is a chronological number that it's assigned. And this one's an old one, it's a claim, so it's got the 00 on it. Or did nothing come up?
No, that one didn't work. Let's see if I can do this.
Well, here, type mine in. You can just type mine in. Just go back to the name, the original one. So there's two ways to query this thing. The simple search is type in Noble. And then Roger. So you can, you know, if you know that there is a my water right. So one of them. So then this one thing will actually generate. The biggest thing it does, it generates an abstract. So go ahead and click on the abstract. So that gives you all the basic information that's derived from the information that's been entered into it. So it's like Ethan said, there's a remarks section on the bottom because this is an old one. It's a statement of claim. It's pre-73. So it gives you all the information on where the point of diversion is, the type, the surface water, groundwater, what it's used for. So that's the basic thing that it generates. But then you can go into document information view. And so when that water right was originally filed in the 80s, because it's a pre-73, so then it gives you all that information that's been scanned in. You can look at see through. Go ahead and maximize that too, yeah. So that's the original file.
And each of those updates
Yeah.
is like an important
Most of
ownership.
the updates or changes of ownership. So.
This sometimes can take some time.
Yeah, but I guess the point is, it's got a wealth of information in there, you know, and it's not hard to use, you know, it's pretty straightforward. See, this is the original person that filed the statement of claim. So it's got all this information in it. These are claims, new ones will be permits. The permits have even more information in them. So you can, the public, anybody can access this portion of it. And I think the DNRC is capable of accessing an even more robust database than this, but this is what the public has access to. So I thought it'd be good if you just knew what it generates, you know.
And just to
Yes.
clarify, this is just for the state of Montana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for the whole state, you know, and so then our portion will be the basins that are particular to the Flathead Reservation, the water basins. So I just thought it'd be good.
I think that was a good idea to go through that for sure. And certainly when you have access to the internal workings of that database, now all of a sudden you can enter and edit And you can move through a little faster typically, not always, but typically it's got a little less clump than the public server system does. But you can also look at, there's certain pieces of information that are easier at your fingertips with the internal working database. So
There's other information that's behind the scenes, but I think, and Payla can probably answer this better than I can, or speak to it better, is that once an application comes in the door, then they start logging it all in. They log in the name, they sign in the water right number, they code it, and everything, and that triggers it. So then it can be continually updated as it moves through the proper review process.
it even automatically sets that priority date. So you once you get something in the door and you start the create phase, it's like date stamp digitally to help you also date stamp the application.
So if you're the person filing the application, can you see that? Can you track that as it's moving through to the public, see that side of it, or?
Typically not until an action happens to either, post it as an active water right, or, some kind of an activity usually has to happen to get it into the posting phase.
It does get posted at major steps, like once there's a criteria thing issued, then they'll give you an update of where it's at in the review process.
If you don't mind going to the state's site, then it shows all the new water right applications received by county. You remember, it might be hard to find because the state rearranged a few things on us. But, if you go to Montana DNRC applications received. And
This one,
Yeah.
And so, here is the way some of those preliminary steps happen where they're, and the last I understood, the DNRC kind of does an internal query and posts them here until they make it to the prime time database phase where they're available on that online setup.
So there, Georgia, is kind of a thing that showed them. So you can see a water right number's been assigned, that's Basin 76F, which I think is over by Glacier County. Who the applicant is, what the source is, the priority data, so.
76F is in Blackfoot. Yep. And that's the Gold Creek right out of Blackfoot. And you see these are in-stream flow applications from the Department of Ag Forest Service.
Yeah.
In Georgia, when that information has been, when DNRC has entered it enough in the database in order to publish it, then the query system is updated daily.
It is. It's a heck of a resource.
All right, okay, will you put my presentation, or Anna's presentation? Taylor White, DNRC, as you know. I think I'm supposed to do that, right? I'm not gonna spell my name, you guys know that. Said that. So I'm gonna just do an overview of Anna Stevenson's presentation from March 9th. And then Ethan and Clayton brought up a few questions since then. And so I have modified this to provide answers to those questions, and then just some additional information that was missing from the first round.
So those are the maroon belt, Colorado, right?
I hope those are in Montana. For real? Oh, man.
Forest. Been there.
Okay, move on. So thanks for providing that overview, especially Ethan, that foundation in the Constitution that, it's a constitutional requirement for the state to have the centralized record of water rights, because it used to be they were just in each county courthouse. And so that was a key part of the Constitution, and why it was so important to make sure that the boards issued water rights also got into the centralized records system. And so the compact requires the board to cause all appropriation rights and changes in use authorized by the board, and all uses of water registered pursuant to the law of administration to be entered into the NRC water rights database in a format agreed to by the board and the NRC. And the way that the database works right now, it works to meet the requirements of state law, but it's not configured in a way to handle the water rights that are pursuant to the ordinance. And so there's going to be a lot of similarities, but the rights are a little bit different. If we were to issue a certificate on the reservation out of the database now, it would say it's issued pursuant to state law and have DNRC's name at the top of it, not the board's name. There's just going to have to be a whole slew of changes. Probably have to be some changes related to how the tribal water right information is entered in there as well, among other things. And so this database needs to be changed in order to provide the board the capability that it needs in order to do its water rights administration. And right now, I'm using board here to mean both the Office of the Engineer and the Flathead Reservation Water Management Board, because it's just shorter. And right now, the board does not have access to the DNRC database, and that's because the database doesn't have the functionality that the board needs, and also because we don't have a firewall in place to protect the off-reservation state-based rights from the on-reservation ones, and that's a key part of the security that we need to have in place as part of this development work. So I'll provide more information on why it's needed, what the process will look like to enhance it, and answer any questions. So if you could go to the next one. I've had a steep learning curve trying to learn about this database. And so I thought it'd be helpful to just start with some definitions. So I'm just going to go through these. So the water rights database is the water rights information system. We call it WRIS, and then also some people call it the WRIS, which really reminds me of the RZA from the hip hop group Wu-Tang Clan. So I just use WRIS. Okay, enhancements are the additions to WRIS that will allow the board to enter their appropriation rights and changes into the database. Respect, that's the company that we worked with to create this database, and then also that we'll work with the board to do the enhancements we need to do for the board. Discovery is the name of the process of you working with Respect and with the board and understanding what the scope and scope of the board's database needs. And so, what all needs to be on the plate to work through this process. And then development, that's the process of actually addressing those needs. And then stories are these very detailed written descriptions of every single step that you need to go through when you are entering each appropriation and change type into WRIS. And then after a story is written, then the developers develop the software to align with that story. And then that story has to be tested by the users that are going to use the database. And so you go through this whole process of testing to make sure it does what it needs to do, and then formally accepting that does what it needs to do. You can move on. And it really is just critical infrastructure for water rights administration, and will be used in all aspects of water rights administration. And I think, Ethan, you covered most of these already, all kinds of processing, reporting decisions, issuing water rights, application fees, key for mailing lists for providing notice, enforcement procedures, It really is used, really at every step of the way. Yes. It's also a key part of building public trust in the Water Rights Administration, and that's partly because it provides for secure administration of water rights. So there's all these safeguards in place so that the information isn't lost, so that it isn't inadvertently changed, or that people who don't have authority to make changes aren't allowed to make those changes. And so it provides the level of security you need for what is the actual official record for that water right. So for DNRC, the information in the database is the official record of that water right, and the applications that people submit or additional information, those are supporting documents for that official record. And so that's part of the public trust. And then the other part is what you guys talked about earlier, which is that the query system that the public has access to, it draws all of its information from WRIS. And so board issued water rights won't be visible to the public until they're in WRIS, and then they'll be visible to the public in the query system. And so these enhancements, they'll provide that data security and also efficiency, because board issued water rights won't be visible in the query system. They're going to have to come into the office to get water rights information, which is less efficient for them and less efficient for the staff as well. And then for everybody to be able to see what the board is issuing and what water rights people have, that's just an important part of transparency and building public trust. And so our role in this process we'll provide technical support. So we'll provide training in how to use the existing database and also how to do some of the discovery, the story development and the testing, although RISPEC will also provide that. We'll provide funding for the enhancement work. And then there's a key kind of coordination piece in that we need to make sure that the enhancements that are made to the database to the board are compatible with the existing database. And then also the place where we have this intersection where the NRC is responsible for ownership updates. So we need to make sure that there's the appropriate access to the board issued water rights in order to do the ownership updates, but nothing more. So that is what our role will be, and we will be with the board every step of the way. We'll be there in all the discovery meetings and story meetings and testing, and are available for training on the front end and the back end if that's helpful as well. And then the board's role derives from its jurisdiction, in that it has sole jurisdiction. And so because of that, there are all these decisions that have to be made in the process of discovery and stories development and testing to ensure that it meets the board's requirements, and DNRC just doesn't have jurisdiction to make all those decisions. And so because of that, the board needs to really lead the enhancement process within financial constraints, and also prioritize the functional database needs, and to make sure that the most important pieces get done. There's always more wingdings and capabilities that the developers can use. So the board needs to prioritize what are the most important functions that it needs for the database, and then drive that story development, testing, and acceptance, because the board's in the best position to ensure that WRIS really meets its needs. And DNRC isn't positioned to make those decisions for the board. And so the process for developing enhancements involves a lot of detailed discussions between the user would be the board in this case, and then DNRC will be there too, and RISPEC, where they need to know, how the water right information is going to be used, how it's going to be entered, what's the end product going to be, and then they ask a lot of follow-up questions. So it's very much a dialogue, and it's important to have people with water rights expertise and decision-making authority for the board in the room as part of that, so that they can tell RISPEC what they need We've also found that teamwork is a really important part of it. And there should be at least 2 people on each team, you know, more is great, but we understand that the board has limited staff. But we've just found that, you know, different people see things different ways. So when I've talked with people who have worked on enhancements for previous versions for DNRC, they've said, oh, this is how we do it. And then someone else will be like, no, but remember when this happens and then you do it this way. Or when they're doing testing, you know, they might catch glitch, different people will catch glitches that other people won't catch. So it's that kind of that team element really makes a difference in how effective it ends up being. And it really is a case of the more that the board invests now, the more efficient and effective it's going to be in the long run. And Maya thinks that could be like an advertising slogan or something like that. So, you know, they need any jingles that you want to provide. I'm taking suggestions for the more that the board invests now, the more efficient and effective it will be. Sorry. Time commitment, it's really going to take a lot of time. As I mentioned, that teamwork's important. So each party's development team should consist of 2 to 4 members. And I totally appreciate that 4 would be a stretch for the board, and even 2 will be a lot. And we estimate that each member of each party's team should expect to work 8 hours per week on it. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but it'd be about 20% of the staff time. And the way that the process works with the developers and with respect is that they need all of us team members to just be very consistent and responsive and timely in every single part of it. Partly because the developer's time is very expensive. And this is just it's a big project. That's significant. Some of the feedback that we got from Ethan was, and a question was, can we do a phased approach with this? And so we talked with the developers, and they said that we can do it in 2 phases. And so Ethan had identified some of these in phase 1 here as being important ones to include in phase 1, like the domestic allowances, registrations, stock water allowances. I think the ownership updates on fee land would be helpful. And then I think it would be worthwhile to talk through whether it makes sense to include the capabilities for the tribal water right registration as well, considering that'll probably be a large volume and the 5 years will be here in no time. But that's just, I just put that up there as something to discuss in the future. The good thing is that when each one of those enhancements are completed and go live, then the board could start using them. So they could start, you know, getting that efficiency and that security before all the work is done. And then with phase 2, the rest of them could be done. And then because this is just such an expensive project, we think it's important for everyone just to have really clear roles and responsibilities. And so we put together the draft charter, which I believe you all have seen, as a first stab at really clearly defining everybody's roles. We also asked CSKT what role, if any, they would like to play in the development of enhancements. And they have assigned Amanda to that task, and she will be fully involved in the development of the enhancements. However, CSKT does not want to be a formal party to the charter. Anything to clarify there? Yeah. And so our request to the board is for the board to really prioritize these advancements to WRIS as critical infrastructure, and to finalize this charter with the NRC so that the board could act on it at the May 11th meeting. And that way we'd be able to just begin work on the enhancements just as soon as possible. Questions, comments, concerns, jingle suggestions?
I'd just like to express gratitude for you and the team for putting this together. This sounds like it's your digital toolkit and you can't really do your job without it, right? And the sooner we can get this going, the better. So when you said 8 hours per week for per member, is that a person on staff or are you requesting board members to help with this? I just want to clarify what the need is there.
Oh, that would be up for you all to determine what's best. You know, we need folks who can consistently show up for the various stages of it. And they need to have water right expertise and decision-making authority. So however you all decide, it's the best way to do that.
So don't you really think, to me, it seems like the basis for most of it is in place. It's just a few new modifications for reservation stuff. And I don't know what all of those are, but I imagine, like Ethan said, some of the tribal things, but you know, it seems like the 95% of it is there.
Yeah, I don't know what percent yet, but that's definitely what our hope is
Yeah.
that most of it's transferable and there's just our minor changes to be made. But when I've asked this question, the folks who know more about this than me, which is most folks, have said that you won't know exactly what percent until you go through that discovery process and really, really drill down into what exactly needs to be different.
So do we have any ballpark estimate of how much time it takes to get this from where it is now to where it's really useful to the team?
Folks have also said, wait till we get through discovery to know that. I mean, we did, in the charter, we proposed, we said that, you know, the more time you put in, the quicker you can get it all done, which, and sometimes that's helpful because then you just don't forget as much stuff along the way and really get good momentum, but then, you know, everybody also has regular jobs they need to maintain, so sometimes stretching it out longer. But we think it could be done in 6 months. But that depends on how much time everyone can really be putting into it. And that also wasn't considering doing it in 2 phases. So we need to talk with RIS again to see, you know, what they're thinking for what that first phase would be. But they did say that as soon as each one of those enhancements is complete for each water right type, that the board could start using them. Actually helpful.
You mind,
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, board members, you mind if I ask some questions? Thank you. Paylor, do you mind?
Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe Amanda wants to chime in on this. When last I visited CSKT registrations pursuant the ordinance, CSKT was hoping and planning on putting things into a load sheet and then doing a mass upload of water rights. Is that still in the works for CSKT's registrations?
And how would that interact with the enhancements?
Well, I am trying to see if, because it could either be, the tribe's registrations could either be like a major, undertaking through the enhancement process, or it could really just be something that needs to be factored in as a water right type that's baked, because there won't be new necessarily registrations that would be entered from scratch through the user interface. We'd really be looking at future edits that would, you know, be needed as per the ordinance, as per typical water right changes that would be implemented. And so that, you know, that part, I'm curious if I know you guys want a response, and that it's something that's like, that's a big block of work that would be either there or not there, I guess.
Yeah. So in that case, we would need to get the enhancements completed so that the database could contain all, you know, so all the information could be loaded up for those water right types, but we are still planning on bulk loading those into the database as soon as those enhancements are complete, so that so all the fields are present in order to be able to load those.
Excellent, that's
Yeah,
useful.
so yeah, so not just one by one.
Right, and just so the board members know, that it's important because with each one of these water right types, when you start getting it set up for initial entry and application tracking process, it's way more complicated than in an arrangement where behind the scenes, there's just a big bulk loading of these. So you don't have to deal with individual user interface for events and entries and so forth. So anyway, I'm glad to hear that we're hoping for bulk and entries of those. I do understand that the reports and other features are unique to them, and not underestimating that there'll still be some tweaking and enhancing needs to happen, but maybe a little less than things. And
Manually.
right, and I do understand that most of those water rights will very much conform with existing state-based equivalents, as opposed to some of the stuff we're working on in this office now, such as our domestic allowances, which have a pre-approval step that doesn't exist for small domestic wells outside, and seems like a minor thing. On a database structure, that is not a minor thing.
Yeah.
That is something that's got to really be brought forward through this discovery and user story for those. And then that one will be a little unique as compared, some parts will match in the ultimate outputs, but some parts pretty much totally different. So anyway, so that was, thank you for entertaining that. I also was, I noticed that on here, the board members should pay attention in some of the fine lettering of the charter, that there is a highlighted section that would like the commitment from the FRWMB to finalize all form types. This is on page 3, to finalize all form types for each appropriation and change in use that needs to be recorded in the FRWMB WRIS. And obviously we've talked about a little bit of a phased approach here, but I want you to understand that that's a significant obligation for us to commit to a timeline. You've seen how the forms and that process can take a fair amount of effort. Some of the ones that are remaining are going to be some of the harder ones to achieve, like the full new appropriations, the changes of existing uses. There'd be a few in there that are a little easier, like some of the new wetland water rights and such, but I did want the board members to be aware that aspect, which is work we need to do anyway, admittedly, but it is a significant amount of work and probably not factored into the 16 hours a week. I want you to understand it is in addition to the 16 hours a week that's I'm going to ballpark at for the request here for our staff for the enhancement work.
And when we drafted this, we weren't contemplating doing 2 phases. So if we, so we should rewrite that section to clarify that there is a second phase and that we can start on the first phase before all those forms are done. And then
Sure, I think we could.
When that makes sense, it would be, it'd be great to be able to start on like the domestic allowances, registrations, dock water stuff. Without waiting for all the forms to get done, at least from our perspective.
Agreed. And even though we could tweak this, I do think it's important that the board understands that is a separate amount of work that needs to coincide, needs to parallel this effort. You're not ever going to end up with a water rights database enhancement that covers an appropriation that you haven't already approved the forms for. Okay. So that this is probably assumed. I just wanted to really point it out as like a significant hurdle that we need to manage with this project.
So basically, the whole staff needs to be forward.
Well,
I'm hearing, it's like, a lot of extra work, and we haven't even got to page 4 yet.
and Anna is done at the end of May. So we're actually reducing in staff size a little bit, and with myself and 3 full-time staff, we're trying to keep up with other programs that have quite a bit more robust staff. Now, I have we can talk a little bit more about that once I want to get Payla in here for any additional questions that you might have about the charter before I start talking about things we can possibly start planning for. Do you guys have any additional questions for Payla?
I just have one. So I spent some time looking through this, and I'll just, this is all new for me, so there's a learning curve on my full disclosure. But on page 4, when it talks about the FR, it's like 3/4 of the way down under FRWMB. And even this, whether you or Payla, I'm not sure you're listening to this, but it said FRWMB leads and is responsible for these testing processes. Does that also mean additional workload for staff or no? Is
That we consider the testing to be a key, or testing is a key part of the enhancements. So that's bundled into the whole thing that we're describing. And it's an especially important place for the board to be involved, because that's where they say, yep, this does meet our needs and do the things we needed to do or not.
I'm just looking at workflow for the existing work that staff has. And then we've got to go through this process so they get the toolkit they need to do their job. And so on page 3, there's additional hours, 16 hours a week. And then we've got additional hours on page 4, possibly, if I'm understanding this.
That's part of the same.
It's part of this.
It's part of this.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I was just like,
Yeah.
is this realistic? Can we ask our staff to do this?
And what's not included in that, and which Ethan was speaking to, is the finalizing of the other form types. We didn't include that estimate here. But I do think that having this as 2 phases could really be more reasonable for everyone to take on.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, I like that concept of the 2 phases, because the first stuff is already generated, those forms, so those should be pretty straightforward to walk through, and they'll then kind of set the base for the next phase of the more complicated stuff. So,
And I think those are the highest volume
yeah,
types as well, where there'll be the most changes happening and the most activity with, at least I would assume.
Do other states have something I assume equivalent to this?
I don't know.
they do.
They do.
Yes. Ours is a little more cutting edge in some ways, especially now that it's linked to the automatic ownership changes and geocodes, so that that ownership process has got a certain amount of automation to it. And what had happened before Montana took that step is you would get multiple ownership changes of a property, yet the water right would linger behind and in the original filing name until somebody somewhere eventually caught up to it. Now Montana's kind of caught up on that front, and then our online query system here in Montana that's pretty outstanding, along with that next to the cadastral. 2 pretty powerful tools for doing water right research and property research.
And we're also in the early stages of upgrading the query system so that it's more user friendly for the public as well. So that's going to be even better for folks to use.
Well, something that just keeps percolating in the back of my mind as we discuss this and pretty much everything else we've done since the board started is we're the first doing it, right? And I don't know if tribes in other states are considering this, but I would imagine if that ever bubbles up in another state, you know, we're the test case, right? Everything that's looked at and evaluated, so no pressure for anything. But no, it's important, and I was just thinking. And again, I'm just trying to get all of this in the right compartments in my head. I'm sorry, I don't think I labored this, but we share a border with Canada, so does another country sometimes share information since we got rivers flowing down this way and whatnot? How does that work? Because there's a lot of trans-boundary issues with water right now. Anyway, we'll chat later.
Yeah, I have all those questions, but I won't bore you all with
Okay.
mine. I don't have answers to them, I just have questions.
Well, we'll do coffee later, sometime,
Yeah.
but I'll play classroom quiz, so thank you.
Anything else?
Feel free to chime in as I go about talking some other stuff here. If you'd like, Kayla. You could, Mr. Frakes, please pull up the rest of my presentation. Excellent. So one of the obvious next steps to address is staffing. And I mean, I think you heard even the first day that we got the presentation, I let you know that we, because of our mandatory timelines and our current workload, we'll be a bit underwater to be more than 16 hours out of the office. And so, you know, what we end up needing to do here, I think, is still fluid. So I can, right off the bat, though, I am interested in assigning one of our current staff as a database manager. That person, however, will need to be kind of integrated into the system with the understanding that they've never used water rights database before. I think it's something that's needed in the office on a long term, and might as well invest in it now, or I mean, I can't remember all of it, but it'd be a good investment to have happen here. So I see value in that. I think we could pull that off right now. I think that person would be able to spend 8 hours a week on this. I would like to explore the option of a former or current state employee familiar with WRS to train and guide the office of the engineer to work on the enhancements. And this would be in addition to what's charted for the state's role here, somebody who would really be in here to help specifically us lift our FRWMB obligations into it, to look at our forms and help that process along. You know, it's just something I'm wanting to explore right now. We don't have any commitments from anybody on the state or anything, but I wanted you to know that that's on my list. Additionally, we did talk about, I must have lost a bullet in here, but just hiring another person or contracting somebody. And I think I thought about that, and then I put the last two bullets in while I was thinking about it. Forgot to put the bullet in about hiring or contracting somebody as an option. But you know, before any of this can happen, we really need to finalize the budget. I just got all the information that I need to build the budget yesterday or last week, excuse me. So we're at least moving forward on that front and once we get some documents signed, I'll have forward-going access to what I need to get a more a budget that's more projection oriented instead of accounting of what's spent oriented. We need to also finalize the work plan, which means the board's asked for it. We have a draft of it so far. It's something that I want to roll out, but we keep we got bylaws and other things that keep, you know, keep getting in the way, but the work plan, which will include, one of the essentials that's needed for hiring more staff will be, trying to finalize our personnel policies and our health insurance. Because right now I am pretty aware that if we go out on the market to pick up new employees with some of the gaps that we've got, we're not going to be quite as successful, I don't think. And so, to me, we gotta just kind of move on those things before we can really address this staffing issue. I know that makes it pretty hard to handle things by May 11th. But anyway, I wanted you to hear from me. We also have a little bit of a next steps in terms of the agreements. And one of these is I do want to, I am trying to listen, and I want to set us up with some clear authority between DNRC and FRWMB for these enhancements, so that DNRC can feel safe in moving forward with us, so that they don't have to worry that they're operating outside of some sort of an authority guideline. And I'm sure that they'll help us understand what's needed there. But if anything, this is, I know you could read this ambiguously a little bit, and I hope nobody does, but this is really intended to just sort of sort that issue out, so that we can do other things. We do have probably some additional immediate MOU needed. We have water right changes that are needed now for things that have like really on our plate needs, like splits or corrections or withdrawals of existing water rights. And we probably need to go ahead and explore some sort of an immediate MOU, so that we can maybe work with DNRC to make a request for some action on water rights that are already in the system. And maybe they could just help us by implementing those through some kind of an agreement. And then furthermore, the current MOU or the current VPN, which is this virtual private network, the state has the way that our office would ultimately find its way to accessing the water rights information systems, that staff here would get signed up with state internal access to the virtual private network the state uses, which is very secure. It's a tunnel. They're gonna want to use a two-factor kind of arrangement where there's a password that you gotta update periodically, and you get some additional software on the phone or something to that effect, and kind of like you're gonna change a bank account or something like that digitally. And one thing we probably do need to recognize is that currently, the state has provided us with the way to go about getting set up with I'm just gonna, what they call is like a CN number, which allows you to have this virtual aspect. But the current agreement through the state is kind of really centered towards state contractors or state employees. And we probably need to just either make sure we're okay accepting that boilerplate, or accept that boilerplate language and add something else onto the MOU that designates that, some of these state-centric policies may not apply to your staff on the board members. So it is something that we do need to figure out. And I'm still trying to work on that. I've had a lot of excellent interactions with Arnie Wick and Payla on that topic, so I feel confident we'll sort that out. And is there any more? Is that it? One more. Yes, ma'am.
On the previous slide, could you
Yep.
share a little bit more what you mean by the clear authority agreement? And specifically, would that be the charter, or would that be something different from the charter? On the personal there.
I'm not sure, you brought up a need to have, sort of clarification that you're acting under the authority of the board to get some of the changes moving. I wanted to just make sure that, I don't know that I've chosen some kind of particular vehicle here, but I wanted to make sure that we accommodated that jurisdictional, that board piece to make sure that the NRC is comfortable on, knowing that there's a way to move forward with this, that copacetic with all the different jurisdictions and forms. And so again, meant here, I realize you could read it in an ambiguous way to go a different direction, but this was really meant to like clear it up so that the NRC is happy. Okay. That was it. Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Next step, you know, we can work on implementing phase one. I'm into it. You know, let's try to move forward with some of the domestic allowances, the stock allowances. State-based registrations are key. Geothermal, placement, redundant wells. Probably end up with complaints if that moves forward. We'll talk about that later here in a minute. And you know, we'll have to implement phase two. So obviously the charter will get finalized in there at some point, and I'm sure I have a few more detailed questions. Like where I'm going to come up with all time for this. I stand for questions.
I don't have any questions. I just have a comment that, you know, this database is fundamental to everything that happens. And so to me, it needs to be raised in priority to focus on allotting man hours to it. You know, maybe we need to push something else aside for a while, because this is so integral to everything that is done and will expedite and be more efficient for the processing of water right acquisition. So I guess that's my thought.
I completely agree. Like I said before, this seems like your toolkit. Without it, you can't really do your job efficiently. But I'm also sensitive to the fact that you need help. And we spoke about this in the last meeting. I think it bears repeating here. If you're trying to hire employees right now, it is a whole different world than it was a few years ago. And we have real challenges to get staff here, whether they have to relocate or drive or whatever. So I guess, Roger, what I would say is I completely agree with you. And somewhere in there, the other priority is we have to deal with this benefits issue so that you guys can get the help that you need. Otherwise, I don't know how we're going to attract them. We're dealing with this on a daily basis, where I work, and we've had some job postings open for weeks, months, going now in some cases into a year, and we cannot get them filled. And that's even with, for this valley, a pretty good pay wage and benefit package. But prices for everything now are extraordinary. And so that really weighs into this. I know you guys are all aware of it, but I feel pressure for that. I feel pressure to get that resolved as well. So everything's important. Immediate, we're behind. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or any suggestion that should be an agenda item for next meeting?
I do. I think that we've got to deal with this. We have a staff here who's been working diligently, extra hours, driving back and forth, doing all kinds of stuff, and they're still waiting
for answers on benefits and, that's not fair to them and we need to get answers to, so.
Other comments? Are we done with 4 then?
I'm done.
Okay, move on to 5. Quick discussion before it's bad.
Well, I guess before we move on to
Yeah.
5, I wanna, so are we gonna endorse that we move ahead with this phased approach on the water rights database system? I think we need to have some sort of,
What can we do today?
I don't think we can do that today.
we could make a recommendation.
Yeah, we could do that, make a recommendation. You wanna make a recommendation?
Yeah, I'll make a recommendation that we, maybe at the next board meeting, Ethan can give us an update on, it sounds like the staffing, how many, there's gonna be one person assigned at 20% of their time, or 2 people assigned at 20% of their time in this office. Sounds like DNRC is committing 2 people. So I guess I would recommend that we move ahead with the phase 1. Instigation of the database, and then let Ethan give us an update at the next board meeting on staffing. I think he's got some good ideas up there. Maybe we need to hire a database person or something, and I don't know, but that all plays back into the budget, which right now is, we don't know where that's at.
About to learn.
So anyway, that would be my recommendation.
Noted. Any other comments on closure? Move on.
Board members, I started the process that you initiated with resolution 1 of your fiscal policies, of getting myself added to the board's bank account, right, at Glacier Bank. And pretty straightforward process. During that process, so I did learn something that was a little different than what I had thought, which is that currently all 5 board members are on the account as signatories, and which is different than what the board's bylaws that they passed said. So I want to bring this to your attention. I know you can't take any action today, but I do need the board to be thinking about, you can recommend to me that we change the bylaws, or you can recommend to me that we reduce the owners on the accounts, and I can bring that paperwork forward to our May meeting, and you can, as a board, take action on one of those items. But I'm making a recommendation today that we get the bylaws to comport with the signatory authorities on the account.
I'm not sure I want to touch the bylaws again.
Yeah.
I think
I mean, I can't speak for Teresa, she's not here, but I think we just reduce the number of signatories. That's just my thoughts.
If I could clarify, I just want everybody, so we originally had no bylaws.
right.
And because there were no bylaws, the bank wanted all 5 members as fine.
Oh, yeah.
That
So that was a bank requirement because it did not have that.
good clarification.
I did not know that, so, and I continue to learn of things that I didn't know, and we're just we'll get it sorted out. I just needed to let you know, somewhere like here, so that we can move forward, and I'll make sure I take a copy of the bylaws to the bank with me. Yeah, so much appreciation, Melissa, for that background.
On the bylaws, has Clayton signed off on?
Yes, the bylaws are all signed, and you gave us the authority through telecommunications to use your stamp for the signatures, so the bylaws are in fact enacted. I have signature, I have the original signatures for the bylaws and all 3 resolutions that have also incorporated the board's mandatory edits and the track changes that were included to the resolutions as best I could.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments on the bank? Well, that will be an action item for next meeting.
Yeah, and what I really needed was, again, the board may not take action. They'll have some paperwork in front of them, and a decision ahead of them. So you're not making a decision today to do anything other than have me draft something that may or may not be enacted by the board. So just to, be clear that I'm not getting you in hot water with making decisions at a work session.
Okay, on the number 6, water user complaints.
Board members, today is just really, I wanted to take this as a moment to kind of go into some small bit of just, I'll call it education, more like review of what we have ahead of us on this particular aspect of water administration on the reservation. We're getting calls about people wanting to file complaints, one water user against another. It's common, especially this time of year. It's going to get more common here. The difference, however, between here and off the reservation is frankly the scope and the authority of our enforcement section under the ordinance, which is not really messing around. And it puts some real requirements on this office from timelines, and adhering to the ordinance, the rules of the ordinance. I think that'd be great if the board will allow. I have Mr. Frakes has created a presentation for us that really looks like it's probably got a little too much writing for a presentation, but we were in a short order, and it'll help us go over these items. And what I really wanted to do today is I wanted to have you hear some of the requirements from the ordinance. And so I'm not trying to overwhelm the board. I mean, I'm a little overwhelmed, so maybe I'm looking for some company, but there are some specifics with the enforcement section that really do need to be noted. This first bit really kind of sets the stage on who we handle enforcement items for. We don't deal with any kind of complaints between water users served water by the FIP. That's not our responsibility, but we can kind of get drug into it if you have a mix of water sources that are being used. And but generally there's not really anything holding a water user back from filing a complaint or either not honoring call, illegal uses of water. Those are the two that are really at the top. And so we kind of we're gonna have to manage this. We're gonna need to manage it with the forum. We did, and when I say we, at my direction, Mr. Frakes has drummed us up a draft form that you have in your packet for complaints. But, and, you know, I want you to have that with you as you move forward, but, right here, an appropriator aggrieved by the action or inaction of any other appropriator or by any person the complainant believes is wasting water to the detriment of a right to use water. The complaint process, the complaint possesses, excuse me, I sort of misspoke there, but they may file a complaint. You know, a draft complaints in your packet with the engineer. Yep,
Where is this from?
this is from the ordinance 31102. So that's 1902.
Gotcha.
And as we drafted the complaint form, because, you know, the complaint's supposed to come in writing, we want to organize people's complaints in a format that's manageable. So we really track a lot of our regular form structure. Because we determined that this complaint has a lot more requirement than an off-reservation water right complaint. It currently sits with a fee. That'll be something that the board will need to deliberate on. But, you know, whether there is one or how much it should be. Thank you. But I want you, this timeline for complaints is within 3 days of the receipt of the complaint, the office of the engineer shall serve a copy of it to the, you know, the appropriator or other person whose action or inaction is being complained of, respondent. And so is the complainant, then the respondent is the arrangement. And then no later than 15 days after the provision of the notice of the complaint to the respondent, the engineer or the designee shall hold a hearing. This gets to an item that Vice Chair Pitt has been reminding me, which is that I myself would benefit from some hearings officer training, and I generally agree that that's probably needed. But the turnaround there is, 15 days happens quite quickly. Does look like I could take an additional 10 days. If I need to perform such independent investigation into the complaint as the engineer or designee deems appropriate. And then offer a decision within 7 days after completing a hearing. Now that timeline is astonishingly quick. This was obviously written by water managers who are not impressed with the current state enforcement timeframes. And so they've picked a very
I didn't do it.
Bill Schultz did that. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Off the reservation. What is the process and the timeline? You get a complaint in Great Falls, what happens?
Well, it's largely at the discretion of the district regional manager. I am nervous about answering for them on enforcement issues, but sometimes people think it takes a long time.
Okay.
I have been part of some complaints myself, and I can speak to those. And they were usually handled. It was really like a letter went out a month and a half after receiving a complaint that had done the research to find out who owns what water right and how the water complaint issue should be resolved.
And before the compact was settled, if there was a complaint on the reservation, there was no avenue, correct?
I did engage with one complainant on the reservation who was, I'll say, a victim of restoration. Their headworks was removed because of a wetland restoration project, and by the time I was ever able to handle it, it had already been resolved amongst parties. So generally, it had a lot of folks had thought of it as a hands-off area because of the CIA cases and taking what was the case decision to mean maybe like DNRC is not really active on enforcement of the reservation.
I'm asking these questions with some intention, knowing that this is recorded and hoping that, some of this information gets out, because I think it bears repeating that because this board and this office exists now, unlike the numerous billboards between here and Missoula, we are actually helping people keep their water. And I think every opportunity we get to underscore that, we need to, because people couldn't do that before. Somebody could be taking water out of your ditch or whatever, I don't know. But I am concerned about these timelines.
And you should also be concerned about what happens if somebody doesn't like the decision that the engineer makes, because any complainant or respondent dissatisfied with the final decision of the engineer or the designee may appeal to the board and become an appellate. And so me entering the fray is one thing, and if I'm unsuccessful at 100% resolution, then you'll hear this as well in this room in some sort of a hearing. So we're in it together. It does vote for why I do believe the board should probably, on a general level, give me guidance that it wants to see, so that the chances of me making a decision that is not appreciated by the board is reduced by as much as we can through process and policy. As you might expect, trying to predict what all of those things are is difficult. If not, perhaps a little impossible, but
So I am a hearings officer for the state. And I can help you somewhat with that.
I'm going to take you up on that. Thank you. So, in an emergency, the engineer or any staff who is so directed by the engineer or water commissioner shall have the authority to lock, remove, render inoperative, shut down, close, seal, cap, modify, or otherwise control methods of diversion and withdrawals and obstructions to the flow of water. So I just want you to understand that that is a fair amount of authority offered. So if you have some situation where canals overflowing, or you've got a gate that's causing some kind of major problem, this office, I don't know how the expectation is, but this is in the ordinance.
That's a real safety issue here. I know the statewide commissioners are peace officers. You aren't yet.
No, that's true. We can look at what else we need to do. So this is additional enforcement powers of the engineer. the engineer or any staff who is so directed by the engineer or any water commissioner may enter upon lands on the reservation with reasonable notice to the owner or occupant to investigate, inspect methods of diversion, withdrawal, and other activities affecting water quantity, to install measuring devices at the expense of the water user on surface and groundwater diversions for the purpose of enforcing and administering this ordinance, and to monitor water use, water quality, and diversion structures. So obviously, nobody in this office is going to take this lightly or flippantly or run out and use this without a lot of caution, but you should be aware that it is. Yeah, it's the language is here.
When I worked for the Park Service in Glacier, we were empowered to issue citations, all that sort of stuff, with absolutely no training. And Park Service in its wisdom finally understood that we were put the potential to put ourselves in very, very dangerous situations and withdrew that authority to issue citations. That's all I'm concerned.
Good points, for sure. We ultimately end up on, some need for me to, or designate to issue written notices of violations. And that kind of does initiate this formal step towards compliance or action against non-compliance. And so, it's outlined here. This part's pretty straightforward. Yeah, generally you land here on 31113, and that's the stick part of the enforcement equation. It's important, I think, that the board contemplate how we want to handle illegal uses of water, how we want to handle these complaints, how we want to handle, some of these things are, I think, more, people just need to be coached into compliance arrangements. Some of them might be a little bit more knowledgeable on the illegal uses of water and resist it. So I wanted to grab a little piece of this meeting, read this with you, let you know that we inform for complaints, and once the complaint form is passed by a board, and there's a complaint process, and the complaint process has got a lot of these ramifications that may affect how we do business in terms of what business we're doing.
I think this on here. You want to talk about
Appeal to the board.
quite long.
Yep, and so once upon receipt of notice of the appeal of the board, acting through the office of the water engineer shall date, stamp the notice, and return a copy to the appellate within 3 days of receipt of the notice to the appeal of the appeal.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not familiar with this. I have not read through this portion as much as I have other portions. But when it says 3 days, is a day defined as a weekday or what? Calendar day. So if this happened on a Friday, it would change a weekend. So this makes us even more strict. Okay, thank you. Wow.
And I've noticed in my former life that parties who want to litigate love serving notice on Friday
I wondered about that.
or Christmas Eve.
This is bad.
And what is the, sorry, I haven't read through this whole thing yet, I'm trying to keep up. What is the repercussion if you can't meet these deadlines?
They're not spelled out like some of the application deadlines where you issue it anyway. To the best of my knowledge, at least. I did think day was defined somewhere.
It's defined in the definitions, of financial disorder. I think the very first meeting I asked that question, Mary, and the answer. It's a 1-106.
One 106.
1-1-106.
Unless the last day falls on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or tribal, state, or federal legal holiday. So there is a bit of a. Okay, that helps.
It's good.
Well, at least gives us a chance, a fighting chance here.
So Ethan, what are you seeing? I mean, what's precipitated this? Are there quite a number of people coming in the door and making complaints, or what's going on?
There's I've been contacted by 2 people complaining about one particular water user in detail that want to have something, they want to file something. So then I've had 3 who are feeling out the process. And whether or not, they take any action, I don't know. Additionally, we are obliged to receive these complaints from folks that are other than just individual water users. So any organization that might want to file a complaint about illegal use of water, even I think there's some specific provisions about the project operator, but I think they can even interact with this about illegal uses of water that are affecting their use. So,
This whole enforcement process, would this be facilitated by kind of like an English handbook? I'm just asking. I mean, because everything's there in the ordinance.
I mean, honestly, I think it'd be facilitated by like a specific staff person being detailed for handling complaints and enforcement issues. And I mean, maybe that just ends up being me on top of other things that I need to be doing, but I think having like one particular go-to person who has at least had the chance to work through this, set up some procedures that may include a handbook or some notes on policies on how to proceed with things, but just to be poised to handle it and know what we're going to do, maybe coming up with if we can't. I'm always gonna lean towards urging people to comply without fines, but that you may direct me differently. So that to me, that's the kind of thing that we need to probably sort out in advance on how the board wants to see those kind of actions happening out there. I tend to try to solve things without having to get into some sort of a really formal arrangement that we may not always be able to do that.
It's just that, I agree with the vast majority of it's just going to be resolved by a conversation. But then there's going to be the one. And I just think we need to be prepared for the one.
So I just had a question and listened to your. I know that as a board, we can't amend the language of the ordinance. But, and maybe this question's already been answered and I just didn't understand it. But if someone's gonna file a complaint against a neighbor or another water user, can we add language regarding mediation rather than only complaint? Is there a way to add another layer to this to keep it from coming to the board? And the follow-up to that is, if it does come to the board, Ken and whoever, does the board need training on how to conduct itself during the hearing? Like, how do we, I've never served in a board, so I would appreciate training. So, thoughts on this?
Yeah. I'll
Sorry.
take a stab at it. So, yes, I think the board would benefit from some hearings training. And may want to also look at publishing some kind of guidance to people who want to appeal on, you know, you could make it as specific or as general as you want for things like how to submit the appeal. What does a notice of appeal look like? You know, do you want it to come on a specific form or not? Do you want to set a schedule for briefing on issues? That's not something that's addressed in the ordinance, but that's certainly something that you could put in like the board's rules for operating on when they receive an appeal. And I'd have to look back specifically at those deadlines and make sure that there would be time for that. But if you have a particularly complicated issue, I would think you would want to have time for briefing. And do not forget that this board is the sole first stop for any compact. So any compact dispute that arises comes before this board first. So it would probably be good to kind of set into place what you want, how you want things presented to the board on appeal. And like I said, that could be as specific or as general, but you know, you want to give some specifics so people know how to do the process and what their opportunities are going to be for submitting briefs, submitting evidence, and how you want that submitted, whether or not you're going to follow the general rules of evidence, whether or not you want to adopt the water court's rules of evidence, or some other rules of evidence that you want to be able to take in information, because you will have the record below from Ethan. But because of those timeframes, Ethan won't have the opportunity to really gather much in the way of evidence or briefing from the parties on those issues, right?
Well, it doesn't even, from what we saw in what was those excerpts from the rules of the UAO, it doesn't even look, there's no reference to counsel in there.
No, there's not. You don't have to have counsel, but then if you do have counsel,
Yeah, it's a can of worms.
Who were the ordinance, everything, its own rules, it's.
did it? Okay,
But I can't find it right off.
All right.
It's been a year since I looked at it, but it's pretty general, what you usually see in heritage office, and you can pretty much accept anything. Yeah, and
Right.
there's time, you can take it under advisement and then take a look at it.
Okay.
This is really egregious and.
okay. I'll have to refresh myself on those sections as well. But I think there are things that you could probably craft to help you be able to make a decision. And that, like I said, may include like a briefing schedule or opportunity for sides to submit briefs, that kind of thing. And what was the first question?
So the way, if I'm reading this, and I'm not, I don't have a legal background, so talking like I'm five and use little words, right? So right now, it looks like if someone's got a grievance, their only avenue is to file a complaint, right? And I don't want to add more complexity to this or add yet one more thing for this office to do, but it seems like it could reduce the workload and the burden if there's a avenue for mediation. And I don't know what that looks like or what that involves, but if there's all these deadlines and timelines and evidence and all this stuff where people can complain about things other than a true water grievance can initiate a complaint here, right? So how do we?
But there is a requirement for me to explain to the two folks that have the complaint and the respondent, that it may be faster and more economical to resolve their problem without the engineer's adjudication. That statement that's in the ordinance actually leads me to believe there's like an implied expectation of fiscal outcome if they cannot resolve it. And furthermore, on our current complaint form, I'm going to encourage, and it's a recommendation to the board, of course, and you haven't passed this form or anything, but that, if this is a call issue, I want to see that they've tried to actually contact the junior water user personally. If somebody thinks somebody's operating without a water right, I want to know that the complainant has try to do some due diligence to determine through the water rights database, the online database, that there is no water right. It gets more complicated because FIP deliveries are virtually impossible to find unless you start digging through people's tax records or try to call the irrigation project, and they've got some other things, probably in their daily utility. But point is that there is a little bit of that encouragement, and we're trying to take the approach that we'd like you to actually talk to the person you're complaining about. I'm not a liaison, and you're in this office, but to do that, you gotta, it's an interesting role.
So that code site is 3-1-1067.
Okay.
So what if somebody's just doing something maliciously?
There's illegally using water.
No, if they're maliciously with no basis accusing the neighbor, right? And they try to involve this office, and then somebody in this office has to invest staff time, which is already at a premium to do this. What protection does our staff have, and does this board have? Is there a consequence to prevent that?
There could be one, if my determination is that the complaint is malicious, okay? I can issue an order that says stop complaining or else this. And this could be a fine. That's how I read it. I'm always getting educated on how these things work, but that was my initial read. I'm still digesting some of this information myself.
So this just underscores that it really is true. Everything you need to know in life, you learn in kindergarten.
Yes.
Right? If you misbehave, there will be a consequence. So, okay.
So I'm thinking that enforcement is going to be a big part of the sports duties in coming years. And I'm wondering if we should have a working committee to actually start looking at the enforcement provisions and that. I'm doing exactly that. At Grow, I'm doing local rules just to help people appeal. I think it's a huge issue, and need to do it right the first time.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I fully agree with Ken. This particular issue is worth you guys spending the time to get it right.
It's one more high priority thing that.
Yes, it is one more high priority thing to do.
Gotcha.
I like your idea of cloning staff.
Right? Yeah, right. They all merit cloning.
So is that something we want to take up the next meeting, whether or not we should have a committee or not?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a good,
Agenda item.
I think it's a good idea.
Thank you for your time on that.
And this question, George asked how fast the process involved the reservation. I filed a water right protection in 1985. I got a decision in 2011.
Okay then. Okay then.
That was an aberration, but still. It happened.
Put that on the billboard. Sorry.
copy or?
I guess I have one more question if I may. Once we move into this phase, whenever it is, where you have to address complaints, is that an additional staff person, or is that a job in addition to current job duties?
I suspect we're gonna work through that in real time.
To see how much it.
It does bode the idea that we would have additional staff. We had additional staff and they were poised to help handle that aspect. They can easily get repurposed to many of these other high priority items. But it does take a little commitment upfront to have the training and the preparation for that in a job description, have that, on the fly. Like I said, I haven't got it all kind of figured out in my head, but I do know that it starts when we publish the form. Which would be the board approves the form.
One more comment from me, and this goes along with enforcement. We are gonna be looking at hiring at least one water commissioner in the foreseeable future. And I think we need to address, you've already asked me to address what qualifications, I just haven't had the opportunity to do it yet, for water commissioner. But there's gonna be quasi judicial and enforcement roles for this person. And, the ordinance, either the ordinance or the compact, if any indication of what this person should be paid or how she should be paid, contract or wage or anything.
Well, and additionally, how to collect funds, because typically, off the reservation, the water commissioner is funded by the water users in the area for which the water commissioner distributes and regulates the water, not by some external fund.
Anyway, we're starting down the whole path. Okay, is that it for water use complaints? Any other comments? No? Board member updates.
I don't have any of them.
No board member updates. Next meeting, May 5th. Is that a given or is that something that's?
May 5th is a Friday.
It is.
So, you know.
Let's get that fixed.
It's a Friday. I can't be here. I'm teaching.
So am
I believe that was a typographical error and should have been May 4th.
For May 4th and May 11th.
Yes, and May 11th is correct.
No, I assume May 4th will be a working meeting.
I believe that the board would have opportunity to interact with their engineer between now and May 4th to designate what's needed. The May 11th is your standard regular meeting. That's the second Tuesday or second Thursday of every month. It doesn't preclude the board from having a working meeting on May 4th, but I do believe I could throw out some proposed items to address on May the 4th. And then the board could tell me what they think, what they'd like to bite off.
Order, any comments?
For the May 4th meeting.
Yeah,
I think we brought up several today, right? We have some that we would need, that would be a normal meeting. We've made recommendations that we would have to move on
May 11th.
for May 11th.
And one option that I had reserved May 4th for was to deal with the personnel policies. Which is something, and the question that I'll have is, trying to figure out whether the board would like a working session to go through, draft personnel policies, or if the board would like to just see a proposed final Office of the Engineer, personnel policies.
And the personnel policy includes medical benefits, correct?
It's not gonna, that will have to happen through a board resolution, and I am actively pursuing additional options. Just to remind folks, we did request to get added to the tribe's FBHB system, and that did not work out for us. And I'm currently investigating other options. These things take a little longer than. Yep.
So May 4th then? Okay. That's not really a decision, just gonna meet in court. Okay, that was the last item. I guess I'll take the motion. Do I need a motion or what do you need for the meetings over?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Uh,
Yeah, adjourned.
So